The flour dust hung in the morning air like confessional smoke, as Dahlia Owens kneaded biscuit dough, with the kind of practiced fury that came from 3 years of feeding hungry ranch hands, who never once looked her in the eye. She had arrived at the Double Bar Ranch in New Mexico Territory in the spring of 1883, answering an advertisement that promised fair wages and decent accommodations for an experienced cook. What the advertisement had not mentioned was that she would be the only woman on a spread that employed 15 men, all of them too rough or too shy to acknowledge her as anything more than the person who filled their plates. Dahlia had learned quickly to keep her head down, her biscuits fluffy, and her expectations lower than a rattlesnake's belly. The kitchen where she worked was a separate building from the main ranch house, a squat adobe structure with a massive iron stove that turned the place into an oven by midday. She had grown accustomed to rising before dawn, when the desert air still held the night's coolness, to prepare breakfast for men who would be in the saddle by sunup. Her hands moved through the familiar motions now without thought, cutting cold lard into the flour, adding just enough buttermilk to bring the dough together without overworking it. The secret, her mother had taught her back in Ohio before the fever took her, was to handle the dough like you were handling something precious and alive. Dahlia shaped the biscuits quickly and slid them into the oven, then turned her attention to the bacon that needed frying and the coffee that needed to be strong enough to wake the dead. Through the small window above her work table, she could see the sky beginning to lighten, turning from deep purple to a pale orange that promised another scorching day. She was 23 years old, and sometimes she felt like she had lived 100 years already. The screen door banged open and Rusty, the ranch foreman, stuck his grizzled head inside. "Smells good, Miss Owens. The boys will be here directly." She nodded without turning around. Rusty was decent enough, always respectful, but he treated her like a piece of furniture that happened to produce food. It was better than some of the alternatives she had encountered in her years of working as a cook, but it still left her feeling hollowed out inside, like she was disappearing a little bit more each day. The cowboys began filing in as the sun broke over the horizon, their boots making heavy sounds on the wooden floorboards, their voices low and rough with sleep. They took their seats at the long table without ceremony, waiting for her to bring the food. Dahlia loaded plates with bacon, eggs, and fried potatoes, saving the biscuits for last because they were best when they came straight from the oven. She had just pulled them out, golden brown and perfect, when she heard the foreman say, "Boys, this here is Fletcher Morgan. He is signing on for the season. Fletcher, grab yourself a seat." Dahlia did not look up immediately, busy as she was transferring the biscuits to a serving platter, but she heard a new voice say, "Appreciate it, sir," and something about the tone made her glance toward the table. The new cowboy was younger than most of the crew, probably no more than 25, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in winter. He was lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate irregularly, and there was a carefulness to the way he moved, like he was constantly aware of the space he occupied and the people around him. When his gaze happened to land on Dahlia, he did something none of the other men had done in 3 years. He smiled at her. It was not a leering smile or a dismissive smile, just a simple acknowledgement of her existence, and it hit Dahlia like a physical thing. She nearly dropped the platter of biscuits, catching it at the last moment and setting it on the table with more force than necessary. "Help yourselves," she said, her voice coming out rougher than intended. The men descended on the food like locusts, as they always did, but Dahlia noticed that Fletcher Morgan took only what he needed, leaving plenty for the others. He also waited until everyone else had been served before taking a biscuit for himself. When he bit into it, his eyes widened slightly. "Madam," he said, and this time he was definitely looking at her, "This is the finest biscuit I have ever eaten." Several of the other cowboys grunted in agreement, but they had their mouths full and their attention already back on their plates. Fletcher, however, continued to look at her with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. "Thank you," Dahlia said, not sure what else to say. She retreated to the stove, busying herself with cleaning up, but she could feel his gaze following her. The meal continued in the usual fashion, with the men eating quickly and efficiently before heading out to their various tasks. Dahlia had learned the rhythm of ranch life, even if she was not truly part of it. In the spring, there was calving to oversee and fences to mend. In the summer, they moved cattle to higher pastures and fought constantly against the brutal heat. Fall brought the roundup, and winter was for repairs and planning. It was a hard life, and it made hard men. As the cowboys filed out, Fletcher Morgan lingered behind, his hat in his hands. "Miss," he said, "I wonder if I might trouble you for another biscuit. For later, I mean. We will be out on the range all day, and I expect I will get hungry." It was a reasonable request, but something about the way he asked, polite and almost hesitant, made Dahlia think he had another reason for staying behind. "Of course," she said, wrapping 2 biscuits in a clean cloth and handing them to him. Their fingers brushed briefly in the exchange, and she felt a jolt of something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope, maybe, or just the simple human need for connection. "I am Fletcher Morgan," he said, as if she had not already heard his name. "I came up from Texas. Before that, I was in Kansas." "Dahlia Owens," she replied, then immediately felt foolish because he had already called her Miss and obviously knew she was the cook. "That is a pretty name," Fletcher said. "Like the flower." "My mother liked flowers," Dahlia said. "We had a garden back in Ohio before." Before the fever, before the death, before Dahlia had found herself alone at 18 with no family and no prospects except the ability to cook. She did not say all of that, but something in Fletcher's expression suggested he understood anyway. "I appreciate the biscuits, Miss Owens," he said. "I will see you at supper, I expect." "I expect you will," Dahlia replied. After he left, she stood in the empty kitchen for a long moment, her hand still tingling from where he had touched her. She told herself not to be ridiculous, that a simple kindness from a cowboy did not mean anything, that she had learned years ago not to expect more from life than what she already had. But the feeling persisted anyway, a small warmth in her chest that stayed with her through the long, hot day. That evening, as she prepared supper, Dahlia found herself taking extra care with the food. She made a pot roast with potatoes and carrots, baked beans with molasses, and a dried apple pie that used the last of her precious spices. And biscuits, of course. Always biscuits. When the men came in for the meal, they were dusty and tired, smelling of horses and sweat. Fletcher Morgan was among them, and when he caught her eye, he smiled again. This time, Dahlia let herself smile back. The days that followed fell into a new pattern. Fletcher always arrived for meals a few minutes early and left a few minutes late. He helped her carry heavy pots, pumped water for her when the barrel was running low, and once fixed the temperamental latch on the oven door without being asked. They did not have long conversations, just brief exchanges about the weather or the work or the quality of the food, but each interaction felt significant to Dahlia in a way she could not quite explain. The other cowboys noticed, of course. Men who worked in close quarters together noticed everything. But Rusty kept them in line with sharp looks and sharper words, and no one said anything directly to Dahlia. She was grateful for that small mercy. 3 weeks after Fletcher arrived, he started asking for seconds at every meal. It started with biscuits, always biscuits, but soon extended to whatever else she had made. Dahlia knew it was not because he was still hungry. The portions she served were generous enough to satisfy even the hardest working men. "No," Fletcher was asking for seconds because it gave him an excuse to talk to her, to stand close to her, to exist in her space for a few moments longer. She should have discouraged it. She should have maintained the professional distance that had served her well for 3 years. Instead, she found herself making extra food, just to be sure there would be seconds available when he asked. One evening in late May, after the other men had left and Fletcher was helping her scrape plates, he said, "Miss Owens, would you think it too forward if I asked to sit with you while you have your own supper?" Dahlia's heart kicked in her chest. She always ate alone, after the men were gone and the kitchen was clean, usually standing up because she was too tired to bother with sitting down properly. The idea of having company, of having his company, was both thrilling and terrifying. "I suppose that would be all right," she said, trying to sound casual. "Though I warn you, I am not much of a conversationalist after cooking all day." "That is fine," Fletcher said. "I am not much of a conversationalist any time, but I would like the company if you do not mind it." So Dahlia fixed 2 plates and they sat at the end of the long table, the same table where 15 men had eaten earlier but which now felt intimate in the quiet evening light. She had made chicken and dumplings, and Fletcher ate with obvious enjoyment. "You have a real gift," he said. "These are even better than what my grandmother used to make, and I thought nothing could beat her cooking." "Is she still in Texas?" Dahlia asked. Fletcher's expression clouded. "She passed 2 years ago. That is part of why I left. The ranch went to my uncle, and he made it clear there was no place for me there. Said I was too soft, too bookish. I do not know about bookish, but I will admit I am not much for violence or cruelty, which seemed to be his main interests." "I am sorry about your grandmother," Dahlia said. "Thank you. She was a good woman, taught me most of what I know about getting along in this world." He paused, then added, "She used to say that you can tell everything you need to know about a person by the food they make, whether it is done with care or just obligation, whether there is love in it or just duty." Dahlia felt her face grow warm. "And what do you think about my cooking?" Fletcher looked at her directly, his creek-water eyes serious. "I think you put your whole heart into it, even when you do not think anyone notices. I think you have been alone for a long time, and you have learned to pour all the things you cannot say into biscuits and stews and pies. I think you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I think about you every minute I am out on the range." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Dahlia could barely breathe. "Fletcher," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you do not know me." "Then let me know you," he said. "Let me sit with you at supper every night. Let me help you in the kitchen. Let me be your friend, at least, if you do not want anything more." Dahlia thought about the empty years behind her and the empty years that stretched ahead. She thought about her mother's garden in Ohio, about flowers that bloomed even in difficult soil. She thought about second chances and the way this man looked at her like she was someone worth looking at. "I would like that," she said finally. "I would like that very much." From that night on, Fletcher stayed after every meal to eat with her. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing the stories of their lives in small increments. Dahlia learned that Fletcher had wanted to be a teacher when he was younger, that he could read and write well, and that he carried a battered copy of Ivanhoe in his saddlebag. Fletcher learned that Dahlia had 2 older brothers who had gone west to find gold and never come back, that she had worked in 5 different kitchens before landing at the Double Bar Ranch, and that she dreamed sometimes of having her own small restaurant in a real town. As spring turned to summer, and the heat became oppressive, their friendship deepened into something more. It happened gradually, in stolen glances and accidental touches, in the way Fletcher started finding excuses to be near the kitchen during the day, and the way Dahlia started taking extra care with her appearance, washing her hair more often and wearing her better apron. The other cowboys continued to pretend not to notice, but Dahlia caught knowing looks passing between them. She waited for trouble, for someone to make a crude comment or try to interfere, but it never came. Later, she would learn that Fletcher had addressed the situation directly his first week, telling the men plainly that he respected Miss Owens and expected everyone else to do the same, and that anyone who had a problem with that could settle it with him outside. Coming from someone else, it might have provoked a fight. Coming from Fletcher, who was quiet but unmistakably tough, who worked harder than anyone and never complained, it commanded respect. In mid-June, the ranch owner, a man named Hutchins who Dahlia had met exactly 3 times in 3 years, announced that he was hosting a small gathering for the neighboring ranchers. It was political, Rusty explained, something to do with water rights and territorial legislature, but it meant extra work for Dahlia. She would need to prepare food for 20 people, including women, and it would need to be fancier than her usual fare. Dahlia threw herself into the preparations with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. She had not cooked for women in years, and the thought of being judged by people who might actually care about things like presentation and variety made her nervous. But it was also a challenge, a chance to show what she could really do when given the opportunity. Fletcher helped her as much as he could, riding into the nearest town, which happened to be Gila City about 15 miles south, to purchase additional supplies. He came back with white flour and refined sugar, fresh lemons that must have cost a fortune, real vanilla, and a bolt of fine white cloth for a tablecloth. "Fletcher, this is too much," Dahlia protested. "I cannot pay you back for all this." "I do not want you to pay me back," he said. "I want you to make something beautiful, because you deserve to show people what you can do. And because," he added more quietly, "I want those fancy ranchers and their wives to know that this place has the finest cook in the territory." Dahlia felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You are too good to me." "Not possible," Fletcher said. The day of the gathering arrived hot and clear. Dahlia had been cooking for 2 days straight, preparing dishes that could be made in advance and assembled at the last minute. She made a crown roast of pork, roasted chickens with herb stuffing, potato croquettes, creamed corn, green beans with almonds, 3 kinds of pickles, yeast rolls, and her biscuits. For dessert, she prepared a lemon cake with boiled icing, a cherry pie, and a blancmange that required every bit of her concentration to keep from curdling in the heat. When the guests arrived, Dahlia was too busy to pay much attention to them. She could hear the murmur of conversation from the main house, the occasional burst of laughter, the clink of glasses. Rusty and 2 of the younger cowboys had been pressed into service as waiters, carrying platters back and forth, and they reported that the food was being received with great enthusiasm. Dahlia was just pulling the last pan of biscuits from the oven when the kitchen door opened and a woman walked in. She was probably in her 40s, elegantly dressed despite the rustic setting with silver threading through her dark hair. "You must be Miss Owens," the woman said. "I am Constance Hutchins. This is my husband's ranch." Dahlia wiped her hands on her apron and attempted an awkward curtsy. "Yes, madam. I hope everything is to your satisfaction. My dear girl, everything is magnificent," Mrs. Hutchins said warmly. "I insisted on coming back here to tell you personally. That lemon cake is the finest thing I have tasted since leaving St. Louis, and as for those biscuits, well, I am going to need you to teach my cook how you make them so light." "Thank you, madam," Dahlia said, overwhelmed by the praise. "I understand you have been with us for 3 years," Mrs. Hutchins continued. "I am ashamed to admit I did not know we had someone of your caliber here. My husband handles all the ranch business, you see, and I spend most of my time in Santa Fe, but I am going to rectify that. Would you be willing to cater a larger party for me in the fall? I would pay you separately, of course, over and above your regular wages." Dahlia's mind raced. Extra money could mean savings, could mean options, could mean a future beyond this kitchen. I would be honored, madam. Excellent. We will discuss the details later. For now, I will leave you to your work, but I wanted you to know that you are appreciated, Miss Owens. Truly. After Mrs. Hutchins left, Dahlia stood in the kitchen feeling like the world had tilted slightly. Recognition. Appreciation. The possibility of something more. It was almost too much to process. Fletcher found her there an hour later, after the guests had departed, and the other cowboys had finished clearing away the remains of the meal. She was scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary, trying to work out the overwhelming emotions churning inside her. I heard what Mrs. Hutchins said to you, Fletcher told her. The whole bunkhouse is talking about it. They are proud of you, Dahlia. We all are. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his voice made her set down the pot and turn to face him. Fletcher, I have been thinking, she said. If I do well with Mrs. Hutchins's party, if I can build a reputation for catering, maybe I could save enough money to actually open that restaurant I told you about. Maybe in Gila City or even Santa Fe. That is wonderful, Fletcher said, but something in his expression had shuddered. What is wrong? Dahlia asked. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Nothing is wrong. I am happy for you. You deserve every good thing that comes your way. I suppose I was hoping. Hoping what? Hoping that when you made your plans for the future, they might include me, Fletcher said. The words came out rough, like they hurt to say. But I understand if they do not. You have dreams, and I am just a cowboy with no prospects and no right to ask you to give up anything for me. Dahlia crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and took his hands in hers. They were calloused and strong, the hands of a working man, and they trembled slightly at her touch. Fletcher Morgan, she said firmly, you listen to me. Every dream I have had since the day you walked into this kitchen has included you. Every single one. I just did not know if you felt the same way, if this was real, or if I was imagining it. You are not imagining it, Fletcher said. His voice was low and intense. Dahlia, I have been in love with you since that first morning when you almost dropped the biscuit platter because I smiled at you. I have been trying to figure out how to tell you, how to ask if you might consider, if you might possibly feel the same way. I do, Dahlia said. I feel the same way. I love you. The words, once spoken, seemed to fill the kitchen with light. Fletcher pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Dahlia let herself lean into his strength. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet evening, and it felt like coming home. I do not have much to offer you, Fletcher said eventually. But I have been saving my wages. I have almost $200 put by. It is not enough for a restaurant, but it is a start. And I will work as hard as I need to, do whatever I need to do to help you build the life you want. The life I want is with you, Dahlia said. Everything else is just details. They began courting properly after that, though it was complicated by the fact that they lived and worked in the same place. There was no privacy on a ranch, no way to steal moments alone without everyone knowing about it. But they managed. Fletcher took Dahlia for walks in the evening after the dishes were done, and before the light failed completely. They would wander out beyond the barn, talking and occasionally, when they were sure no one could see, stealing kisses that made Dahlia's heart race. The other cowboys, to their credit, gave them space. It helped that Fletcher had proven himself as capable a hand as any of them. He could rope and ride and handle cattle with the best, and he never shirked the hard or dirty work. They respected him, and by extension, they respected his relationship with Dahlia. As summer wore on, Fletcher started talking about the future in concrete terms. He wanted to marry her, he said, wanted it more than anything. But he would not ask properly until he had something solid to offer her. He began making inquiries about land, about what it would take to start a small spread of their own. The numbers were daunting. Land was expensive, cattle were expensive, and the equipment needed to run even a modest ranch was beyond their means. But then Mrs. Hutchins's fall party provided a breakthrough. It was even larger and more elaborate than the summer gathering, with guests coming from as far as Albuquerque and El Paso. Dahlia worked herself to exhaustion preparing food for 40 people, and the event was a tremendous success. Mrs. Hutchins paid her $50, and 3 of the other women asked for her services for their own upcoming events. By October, Dahlia had an additional $130 saved. Combined with Fletcher's savings, they had enough for a down payment on a small property near Gila City that included a house and enough land for a garden and some chickens. It was not much, but it was a start. Fletcher proposed to her on the first day of November. He did it properly, going down on one knee in the kitchen after supper, presenting her with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "Dahlia Owens," he said, "I do not have much to give you except my heart and my promise that I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make you happy. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Dahlia said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in Gila City, 2 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the small Catholic church with Rusty and Mrs. Hutchins standing as witnesses. Dahlia wore a dress she had made herself from pale blue cotton, and Fletcher wore his best shirt and a new string tie. After the ceremony, they had a wedding supper at the boarding house, where Dahlia had prepared the food herself, because she could not bear to let anyone else do it. There were biscuits, of course, and Fletcher made a toast about how she had melted his heart with those biscuits, and how asking for seconds had been the best decision of his life. "And now," he said, raising his glass, "I am asking for forever." The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Dahlia felt happiness burst through her chest like sunrise. They stayed in Gila City that night, in a rented room that was small but clean and blessedly private. Dahlia had been nervous about her wedding night, but Fletcher was gentle and patient, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, talking and laughing and making plans for their future. "I was thinking," Fletcher said, "about that property near town. The house needs work, but it has a good well and the land is fertile. We could keep some chickens and maybe a milk cow. And you could start your catering business from there, maybe eventually open a small restaurant if that is what you still want." "What about you?" Dahlia asked. "What about your work?" "I can hire on at one of the nearby ranches for the busy seasons," Fletcher said, "or do day labor. Whatever it takes, but I want to build something with you, Dahlia, something that is ours." They returned to the Double Bar Ranch the next day to work out their notice. Hutchins was unhappy to lose them both, but understood. He offered them a bonus for their years of service, which they gratefully accepted. Rusty, gruff as always, pulled Fletcher aside and told him he had better treat Miss Owens right, or he would answer to every cowboy in the territory. Fletcher solemnly promised that he would. They moved to their new property just before Christmas. The house was small, just 3 rooms, but it had good bones and a large kitchen with a modern stove that Dahlia fell in love with immediately. Fletcher spent the winter making repairs and improvements while Dahlia set up her catering business. She put advertisements in the Gila City newspaper and on the bulletin board at the general store, offering her services for parties, weddings, and special occasions. The response was better than she had dared hope. It turned out that Mrs. Hutchins had been singing her praises to everyone she knew, and women throughout the region were eager to hire a skilled cook who could produce sophisticated food appropriate for formal entertaining. By spring, Dahlia was booking events months in advance, and Fletcher had built a large outdoor oven to help her manage the volume of baking. They fell into a rhythm as husband and wife that felt both comfortable and exciting. Dahlia would rise early to bake, filling their small house with the smell of bread and biscuits and cakes. Fletcher would do the heavy work of hauling water and chopping wood, tending to their chickens and the vegetable garden that Dahlia had planted in the spring. In the afternoons, he would ride out to whatever ranch had hired him for the day, while Dahlia focused on her cooking. Evenings were theirs, spent talking about their days, planning for the future, and simply enjoying each other's company. In June, Dahlia realized she was pregnant. She told Fletcher one evening after supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. They had not talked much about children, both of them so focused on establishing their new life together. "A baby," Fletcher said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "In February, I think," Dahlia said. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy." Fletcher pulled her into his arms, laughing. "Dahlia, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I can hardly stand it. A baby, our baby." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about names and how they would convert the small storage room into a nursery. Fletcher insisted that Dahlia cut back on her catering work as her pregnancy progressed, not wanting her to exhaust herself. Dahlia agreed, though she continued to take smaller jobs that did not require quite so much physical labor. In August, Fletcher came home with news that made both of them sit up straight. One of the established restaurants in Gila City was going up for sale. The owner, an elderly man named Parsons, wanted to return east to live with his daughter and was looking for a buyer who would maintain the business rather than just acquiring the property. "How much is he asking?" Dahlia asked, her heart pounding. $500 for the building and equipment, plus he wants the new owner to keep his head cook on staff, Fletcher said. "I know it sounds like a lot, but Dahlia, this could be exactly what you have been dreaming of. A real restaurant in town with an established customer base." They spent days going over their finances, calculating what they could afford. Between Dahlia's catering earnings and Fletcher's wages, they had saved nearly $400. It was not enough, but Fletcher suggested they could take out a small loan for the difference, using their property as collateral. It was risky, and they both knew it. If the restaurant failed, they could lose everything. But the opportunity was too good to pass up. They met with Mr. Parsons in early September. He was a thin, tired-looking man who seemed genuinely pleased that a young couple was interested in taking over his life's work. "My wife and I ran this place for 30 years, he told them. "It has a good reputation, steady business. The problem is I am getting too old to keep up with it, and since my wife passed 2 years ago, my heart has not been in it. You seem like good people. I think you would do right by the place." After some negotiation, they agreed on a price of $450, with the understanding that Dahlia would spend a month working alongside Mr. Parsons and his head cook to learn the operations before taking over completely. Fletcher secured the loan from the bank in Gila City, putting up their property as security, and by the end of September, they were the proud owners of Parsons' restaurant. Dahlia wanted to rename it, but Fletcher convinced her to keep the established name for now. "We can always change it later," he said. "But right now, people know Parsons' restaurant. Let us build on that recognition before we start making changes." It was good advice. The transition went more smoothly than Dahlia had feared. Mr. Parsons was patient and thorough, teaching her everything about managing the business side of running a restaurant. The head cook, a taciturn man named Jim, was initially skeptical about working for a woman, but came around quickly once he tasted her food. They established a good working relationship, with Jim handling the daily menu items while Dahlia focused on special orders and the baked goods that were rapidly becoming the restaurant's signature offering. Fletcher split his time between working at nearby ranches and helping at the restaurant, doing whatever needed doing from repairing broken equipment to serving tables during busy times. He had a natural ease with people that Dahlia envied, able to chat with customers and make them feel welcome without seeming obtrusive. As fall turned to winter, and Dahlia's pregnancy became more obvious, she had to make adjustments to how she worked. She could no longer stand for hours at a time or lift heavy pots, so Fletcher hired a young woman named Sarah to help in the kitchen. Sarah was 18, eager to learn and proved to be a quick study. Dahlia found herself enjoying the role of teacher, passing on the techniques her own mother had taught her. Their son was born on a snowy February morning in 1885, after a labor that lasted 14 hours and left Dahlia exhausted but triumphant. Fletcher, who had been pacing the hallway outside their bedroom like a caged animal, broke down in tears when the midwife finally let him in to meet his child. "He is perfect," Fletcher whispered, holding the tiny bundle with the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences. "Dahlia, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Dahlia's father and called him Tommy from the start. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. Dahlia took 6 weeks off from the restaurant to recover and bond with her son, but she found that she missed the work. Cooking was not just what she did, it was part of who she was. She returned to the restaurant in late March, bringing Tommy with her and setting up a small cradle in the office where she could keep an eye on him while she worked. It was exhausting, juggling motherhood and business ownership, but Fletcher was always there to help, and so was Sarah, who proved to have a natural way with babies. As Tommy grew, the restaurant thrived. Word spread about the quality of the food, particularly Dahlia's biscuits, which people came from miles around to taste. They were light as air, golden and buttery, with a texture that seemed to melt on the tongue. Dahlia made them fresh every morning, and they usually sold out by noon. One regular customer, a businessman from Santa Fe, told Fletcher that the biscuits reminded him of his childhood, of his mother's love and warmth, and that eating them made him feel like he was home again. Fletcher shared the comment with Dahlia that evening, and she felt tears prick her eyes. "That is what I always wanted," she said. "To make food that matters to people, to give them something more than just sustenance." "You do that every day," Fletcher assured her. "You have no idea how many lives you touch with your cooking." By the time Tommy was walking, the restaurant had paid off its loan and was turning a steady profit. They were able to hire additional staff, which gave Dahlia more time to spend with her son and Fletcher more flexibility in his own work. Fletcher had discovered a talent for the business side of things, handling the books and managing supplies with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. In the summer of 1886, Mrs. Hutchins came to visit with exciting news. She was organizing a territorial fair in Santa Fe and wanted Dahlia to provide food for the governor's reception. It would be the biggest event Dahlia had ever catered, with over 100 expected guests, including politicians, businessmen, and wealthy ranchers from throughout the territory. "I cannot do this without you," Mrs. Hutchins said. "You are the finest cook I know, and I want the governor to taste what New Mexico territory has to offer." Dahlia accepted the commission, then spent the next 2 months planning and preparing. She decided to feature regional specialties alongside more refined dishes, wanting to showcase the unique character of their home. There would be green chili stew and pozole, roasted quail and beef tenderloin, calabacitas and corn pudding, and of course, her biscuits. The event was a spectacular success. The governor himself sought Dahlia out to compliment her cooking, and she found herself surrounded by people wanting to know where she had trained and whether she would consider relocating to Santa Fe. Dahlia thanked them politely but explained that she was happy in Gila City with her husband and son. On the way home, Fletcher took her hand and said, "You could have told him yes, you know." If you wanted to move to Santa Fe to have a bigger restaurant in a bigger city, I would support that. I know you would, Dahlia said, but that is not what I want. What I want is what we have built together, our restaurant, our home, our life. I do not need it to be bigger, I just need it to be ours. Fletcher raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. I love you, Dahlia Morgan. Have I mentioned that today? Not in the last hour, she said, smiling. Their life settled into a comfortable pattern over the next few years. Tommy grew into a bright, curious child who loved spending time in the restaurant kitchen, standing on a stool next to his mother and helping her measure flour. Dahlia taught him to make biscuits when he was 5, guiding his small hands through the motions, and Fletcher captured the moment in his memory as one of perfect happiness. In 1888, they had a second child, a daughter they named Lily. She was tiny and fierce from the start, with her father's creek-water eyes and a temperament that suggested she would never let anyone push her around. Tommy adored his little sister, appointed himself her protector, and could often be found singing to her or bringing her flowers from the garden. The restaurant continued to grow and evolve. In 1889, they finally changed the name, calling it simply Dahlia's. It felt right, acknowledging that while they had built on Mr. Parsons's foundation, they had created something distinctly their own. Fletcher designed a new sign that hung over the front door, with Dahlia's name painted in elegant script and a small dahlia flower in the corner. They expanded the menu, adding new dishes based on Dahlia's experiments and customer requests. But the biscuits remained the heart of everything, the item that kept people coming back, that turned first-time visitors into regular customers. Dahlia had refined her recipe over the years, making tiny adjustments until she had achieved what she considered perfection. And she guarded that recipe jealously, teaching it only to Fletcher and eventually to Sarah, who had become her trusted assistant and friend. In the spring of 1890, on a warm afternoon when the cottonwoods were just beginning to leaf out, Fletcher found Dahlia in the garden behind their house. She was planting tomatoes while Tommy helped, and Lily toddled around picking dandelions. "Do you remember," Fletcher said, settling down beside her, "when I first asked you for seconds on those biscuits?" "Of course I remember," Dahlia said. "That was when I started to hope that maybe you felt the same way I did." "I was so nervous," Fletcher admitted. "I thought for sure you would see right through me, that you would know I was not really hungry, I just wanted an excuse to talk to you." "I knew," Dahlia said, smiling, "but I did not mind. I wanted you to talk to me." Fletcher pulled her close, heedless of the dirt on her hands and the children playing nearby. "I asked for seconds that day, and then I kept asking, because every moment with you was sweeter than anything I had ever tasted. And then I asked for forever, and you said yes, and Dahlia, I want you to know that forever is still not long enough. I would ask for twice forever if it were possible. I would ask for eternity." Dahlia kissed him, tasting salt and sunshine and love. "You already have eternity," she said. "You have had it since that first morning when you smiled at me, and I nearly dropped the biscuits. You will have it until the day I die and whatever comes after that." Tommy, who was old enough to find his parents' affection both embarrassing and fascinating, made a face. "Are you two going to kiss all day? Because Lily is eating dirt." They broke apart laughing, and Fletcher scooped up their daughter while Dahlia brushed the soil from her mouth. It was such an ordinary moment, so domestic and unremarkable, but it was also everything Dahlia had ever wanted. Family, home, love, purpose. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Dahlia made a batch of biscuits just for Fletcher. She had done this periodically over the years, making them as a gift when she wanted to express something words could not quite capture. Fletcher ate them slowly, savoring each bite, and when he was done he said, "I will never get tired of these. I could eat your biscuits every day for the rest of my life, and they would still surprise me with how perfect they are." They are just biscuits, Dahlia protested. No, Fletcher said seriously. They are not just biscuits. They are love made tangible. They are proof that simple things done with care and attention can be extraordinary. They are the thing that brought us together and the foundation of everything we have built. Those biscuits changed my life, Dahlia. They gave me you. Dahlia felt tears slip down her cheeks. Even after all these years, Fletcher could still surprise her with the depth of his feeling, with his ability to see meaning in the everyday. I love you, she said. I love our life. I love everything we have become together. Then we are in agreement, Fletcher said, pulling her into his arms, because I feel exactly the same way. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. There were lean times when drought hurt the ranches and business slowed, and good times when prosperity seemed to touch everything. Tommy grew into a thoughtful young man who loved books as much as his father did, and Lily proved to have inherited her mother's gift for cooking. Sarah married Jim, the head cook, and they had 3 children who treated the restaurant like a second home. In 1895, Dahlia and Fletcher celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. They closed the restaurant for the day, something they had never done before, and had a private party with just their family and closest friends. Rusty came down from the Double Bar Ranch, gray-haired now but still tough as leather. Mrs. Hutchins sent a telegram from Santa Fe with her congratulations and a generous check. The celebration was simple but heartfelt, full of laughter and good food and genuine affection. That night, lying in bed with Fletcher's arms around her, Dahlia thought about the girl she had been 10 years ago, lonely and invisible, convinced that her life would always be defined by what she lacked rather than what she had. That girl would never have believed this future was possible, that she could be so completely happy. "What are you thinking about?" Fletcher asked sleepily. "About biscuits," Dahlia said. Fletcher laughed. "After 10 years, I should have known that would be the answer." "No, I am serious," Dahlia said. "I am thinking about how strange it is that something so simple, so basic, could end up meaning so much. Flour and lard and buttermilk mixed together and baked, but those biscuits brought you to me. They gave me confidence and purpose. They built our business and fed our family. It is like, I do not know, like they were magic." "Maybe they were," Fletcher said. "Or maybe you are the magic and the biscuits are just one of the ways it manifests. Either way, I am grateful. I am grateful for the biscuits and for you, and for every single day we have had together." "Even the hard days?" Dahlia asked. "Especially the hard days," Fletcher said, "because those are the days when I got to watch you be strong and brave and absolutely magnificent. Those are the days when I fell in love with you all over again." They made love then, slow and sweet, with the familiarity of a decade together and the passion that had never diminished. Afterward, Dahlia drifted off to sleep feeling utterly content, utterly at peace. As their children grew older, Dahlia began teaching them everything she knew about cooking and running a business. Tommy had his father's head for numbers and organization, while Lily had a creative flair that led her to experiment with new recipes and techniques. Together, they represented the future of the restaurant, and Dahlia took great pride in watching them develop their skills. In 1898, when Tommy was 13 and Lily was 10, Fletcher surprised Dahlia by purchasing the empty lot next to the restaurant. He had been saving secretly for over a year, he explained, and his plan was to build an expansion that would include a proper bakery and a larger dining room. "We have outgrown our current space," he said, "and I want to build something that will last, that Tommy and Lily can take over someday if they choose to, something that will be part of Gila City for generations." The construction took 8 months, and during that time, the restaurant continued to operate, though in somewhat cramped conditions. But when the expansion was finally complete in early 1899, it was worth the inconvenience. The new bakery had 2 ovens and a large workspace where Dahlia could produce much higher volumes of bread and pastries. The dining room could now seat 40 people comfortably, and there was a private room in the back for special events. They held a grand reopening on Valentine's Day, which seemed appropriate given that the restaurant had always been, at its heart, a love story. The whole town turned out for the celebration, and Dahlia made hundreds of her famous biscuits, giving them away for free to anyone who wanted them. It was her way of saying thank you, of acknowledging that their success had been built on the support of the community. As the 19th century drew to a close and the 20th began, Dahlia felt herself becoming reflective. She was 38 years old, no longer young but not yet old, and her life had exceeded every dream she had ever allowed herself to have. She had a husband who loved her deeply, 2 healthy children who were growing into remarkable people, and a business that provided not just income but genuine satisfaction and purpose. One morning in the early spring of 1900, as she was making her daily batch of biscuits, she realized that Fletcher was watching her from the doorway. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked. "Not long," he said. "I just like watching you work. You have such grace, such confidence." "It is beautiful. I have been making biscuits for nearly 20 years, Dahlia said. "I would hope I have some confidence by now." Fletcher crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you ever miss it? The quieter life we had at the beginning when it was just the 2 of us?" "Sometimes," Dahlia admitted. "But I would not trade what we have now for anything. Our children, our business, our place in this community. It is all more than I ever thought I would have." "I feel the same way," Fletcher said. "Though I will admit, I am looking forward to when the kids are grown and it is just us again. Not that I want to rush them out the door, but I think there is something nice about the idea of growing old together, just you and me." "Just you and me and the restaurant," Dahlia corrected, smiling. "Just you and me and the restaurant," Fletcher agreed. As their children entered adolescence and then young adulthood, Dahlia and Fletcher found themselves evolving into new roles. Tommy went away to school in Albuquerque for 2 years, studying business and accounting, before returning home to take over much of the restaurant's administrative work. Lily, more interested in the creative side, became Dahlia's partner in the kitchen, bringing fresh energy and new ideas while respecting the traditions that had made the restaurant successful. In 1905, Tommy announced that he was engaged to a young woman named Margaret, the daughter of the local banker. The wedding was held that summer, and Dahlia catered it herself, insisting that no one else would do it properly. It was a joyful celebration, and watching her son dance with his new bride, Dahlia felt the bittersweet ache of time passing. "He is not really leaving us," Fletcher reminded her that night. "He will still be at the restaurant every day. We will still see him all the time." "I know," Dahlia said. "But it is different. He has his own life now, his own priorities, as he should. It is just strange to realize that the little boy who used to stand on a stool in my kitchen is grown up and married." Fletcher pulled her close. "We still have each other," he said. "That has not changed." And it had not. Through all the years and changes, their love had remained constant, the bedrock on which everything else was built. They still ate supper together every evening, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still found moments to steal kisses in the pantry like newlyweds. In 1907, Dahlia became a grandmother when Tommy and Margaret had a son they named Fletcher after his grandfather. Dahlia cried when they told her the name, overwhelmed by the honor and the sense of continuity it represented. Baby Fletcher was a serious child who watched everything with solemn eyes, and his grandfather doted on him shamelessly. 2 years later, Lily announced that she was engaged to a cowboy named Daniel who worked at one of the nearby ranches. He was a good man, respectful and hardworking, and he clearly adored Lily. Fletcher gave them his blessing with the understanding that Daniel would need to find work that kept him closer to home, as Lily had no intention of leaving the restaurant. Daniel proved adaptable, hiring on as a ranch hand at a spread just outside of Gila City that allowed him to come home every evening. He and Lily married in a simple ceremony in the fall of 1909, and Lily continued working at the restaurant right up until the day before she gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Dahlia Rose. Having a granddaughter named after her moved Dahlia even more than young Fletcher had. "I hope she has easier life than I did," Dahlia told her daughter. "I hope she never has to feel invisible or unappreciated." "She will not," Lily assured her. "She will grow up knowing she comes from a line of strong women who built something meaningful. She will know her grandmother's story, and it will give her courage." As the years passed and more grandchildren arrived, Dahlia gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the restaurant. She still came in every morning to make biscuits, unable to give up that ritual, but she left most of the other work to Lily and the expanded staff. It gave her more time with Fletcher, more time to enjoy the fruits of everything they had built together. They took trips occasionally, traveling to Santa Fe and Albuquerque and once even to Denver, but they always came home to Gila City, to their house with its garden and their restaurant with its familiar rhythms. This was where they belonged, where their roots went deep. In the spring of 1912, the town organized a celebration for the 30th anniversary of Dahlia's arrival in New Mexico territory. It was not something she had asked for or expected, but the community insisted, wanting to honor the woman whose cooking had been part of so many of their lives' important moments. The celebration was held at the restaurant, with speeches and toasts and more food than could possibly be eaten. The mayor gave a speech about how Dahlia's had become an institution, a place that represented the best of what Gila City could be. Mrs. Hutchins, now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack, told the story of that first dinner party at the Double Bar Ranch and how she had immediately recognized that Dahlia was someone special. And then Fletcher stood up to speak. He was 54 years old, his dark hair threaded with silver, his face lined from decades of sun and work and laughter. But his eyes were the same creek water shade they had always been, and when he looked at Dahlia, she felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt at 23. "Most of you know the public story," Fletcher said. "How my wife came to New Mexico and worked as a ranch cook, how we met and fell in love, how we built this restaurant together. But what you might not know is the private story, the small moments that made all the difference. You do not know that the first time I tasted Dahlia's biscuits, I thought I had never experienced anything so perfect in my life. You do not know that I started asking for seconds not because I was hungry, but because it gave me an excuse to talk to her, to be near her, to exist in her orbit for a few moments longer." The room was completely silent, everyone hanging on his words. "And you do not know," Fletcher continued, his voice thick with emotion, "that when I finally worked up the courage to ask her to marry me, I felt like I was asking for something I did not deserve, something too good and too precious for a simple cowboy. But Dahlia said yes anyway. She chose me. And every day since then, I have tried to be worthy of that choice. I have tried to love her the way she deserves to be loved, completely and unreservedly, and with everything I have." He turned to face Dahlia directly. "You melted my heart with those biscuits," he said. "You melted my heart, and you built me back up into someone better than I was before. You gave me a family and a purpose and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. So this celebration is wonderful, and you deserve every bit of recognition you are getting, but I want everyone here to know that the greatest gift Dahlia ever gave was not her cooking. It was herself. It was saying yes when I asked for forever. There was not a dry eye in the room." Dahlia stood and crossed to her husband, and they embraced while the crowd applauded. In that moment, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and the community they had helped build, Dahlia felt complete. Her life had turned out to be exactly what it was supposed to be. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Dahlia and Fletcher spent more time simply being together, tending their garden, playing with their grandchildren, and enjoying the peace that came with having built something lasting. The restaurant continued to thrive under Lily and Tommy's management, evolving with the times while maintaining the core values that had always defined it. In 1918, when the influenza pandemic swept through the country, Gila City was not spared. The restaurant closed temporarily, and Dahlia and Fletcher spent weeks helping care for the sick and feeding those who could not care for themselves. It was exhausting and frightening, and they lost friends and neighbors, but their immediate family survived intact, something Dahlia counted as a tremendous blessing. When the crisis finally passed, they reopened the restaurant with a renewed sense of gratitude and purpose. Life was precious and uncertain, and the simple act of sharing food and fellowship seemed more important than ever. On a crisp November morning in 1920, Dahlia woke to find Fletcher already up and sitting by the window, watching the sun rise. She joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the chill. "Could not sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking," Fletcher said. Remembering what? Everything. All of it. The day I first saw you, the first time I kissed you, the day Tommy was born. That terrible winter when we thought we might lose the restaurant, the day Lily got married. Every moment, big and small, that brought us to right here, right now. "And what is your conclusion?" Dahlia asked, leaning against him. "That I would do it all again exactly the same way," Fletcher said. "That I have been blessed beyond measure. That loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Dahlia thought about all the years behind them and whatever years remained ahead. She thought about the girl she had been, lonely and struggling, and the woman she had become, surrounded by love and purpose. She thought about how a simple act of kindness, a smile from a cowboy who appreciated her biscuits, had changed the entire trajectory of her life. "Fletcher," she said quietly, "do you remember when you asked me for forever?" "Of course I remember. It was the most important thing I ever asked anyone." "You know what I realized," Dahlia said. "Forever is not just one thing. It is made up of all these small moments, these ordinary days where nothing special happens except that we are together. Forever is morning coffee and evening walks and making biscuits on Tuesday. Forever is the accumulation of all these little forevers, strung together like beads on a string." "That is beautiful," Fletcher said. "That is us," Dahlia replied. "We are beautiful, not because we did anything extraordinary, but because we chose each other every single day. Because we built a life together one day at a time, one biscuit at a time, and we never stopped choosing each other." Fletcher kissed her temple. "I will always choose you. Until my last breath and beyond, I will always choose you." In the years that followed, Dahlia and Fletcher settled into the comfortable rhythms of old age. They remained active in the restaurant, though more as beloved figureheads than active managers. Dahlia still made biscuits most mornings, though her hands were not as steady as they once were, and Lily often helped her. Fletcher still kept the books, though Tommy handled most of the actual decision-making. They took pleasure in watching their grandchildren grow, and eventually their great-grandchildren arrive, a whole new generation to carry the family forward. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1925, the restaurant held another celebration. Dahlia was 64 years old, Fletcher 66, and they had lived long enough to see their modest biscuit and love story become part of the town's history. The celebration was quieter than the one 13 years earlier, more intimate but no less meaningful. That night, alone in their bedroom, Fletcher presented Dahlia with a small wooden box he had carved himself. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Dahlia unfolded it carefully and found a recipe written in her own younger handwriting. Her biscuit recipe, the one that had started everything. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "I asked you for it once, years ago, and you wrote it down for me," Fletcher said. "I kept it all these years because it felt important. This recipe, these words in your handwriting, they represent everything we have become. I thought maybe we could give it to the grandchildren, so they will always know where they came from." Dahlia felt tears streaming down her face. "You kept this for 40 years. I kept it because it mattered," Fletcher said simply. "Because you mattered. Because those biscuits brought me to you, and you are the best thing that ever happened to me." They made love that night with the tenderness of long practice, their bodies familiar but still capable of surprising each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking about the past and the future until they drifted off to sleep. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, Dahlia and Fletcher continued their quiet life in Gila City. The restaurant thrived even through the hardships of the Great Depression, providing affordable meals and sometimes free food to those who could not pay. Dahlia insisted on this policy, remembering her own lean years, and Fletcher supported her completely. "They would figure it out," he said. "They always did." In the summer of 1935, Fletcher suffered a heart attack while working in the garden. Dahlia found him collapsed among the tomato plants and screamed for help. Tommy, who had been visiting, ran for the doctor, but by the time help arrived, Fletcher was already gone. He died with dirt under his fingernails and the sun on his face in the garden he had tended for decades. Dahlia was devastated. After 50 years together, she had somehow thought they would go simultaneously, that neither would have to face life without the other. But life was not so neat. She was left alone at 74, surrounded by family and love, but feeling Fletcher's absence like a physical wound. The funeral was the largest Gila City had ever seen. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects to the man who had been unfailingly kind, who had worked hard and loved deeply, who had helped build something lasting. But Dahlia barely registered any of it. She moved through the service in a daze, accepting condolences mechanically, unable to fully process that Fletcher was gone. In the weeks that followed, she found herself unable to return to the restaurant. The thought of going there without Fletcher, of making biscuits in a world where he would never taste them again, was unbearable. Lily ran the business while Tommy handled their mother's affairs, both of them worried about how she would survive this loss. But slowly, painfully, Dahlia began to heal. She found comfort in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the garden Fletcher had loved, in the routines that had shaped her life. And eventually, 3 months after Fletcher's death, she returned to the restaurant kitchen. "I do not know if I can do this," she told Lily that first morning. "You do not have to, Mama," Lily said. "We will understand if you want to stay home." But Dahlia shook her head. "No, this is what Fletcher would want. He would want me to keep going, to keep making biscuits, to keep living. I owe him that much." She mixed the dough with shaking hands, her vision blurred by tears, but she did it. And when the biscuits came out of the oven, golden and perfect as always, she felt Fletcher's presence so strongly it was almost like he was standing beside her. "I did it," she whispered. "I made biscuits without you, and I will keep making them every day because that is how I will remember you. That is how I will honor everything we built together." Dahlia lived for another 8 years after Fletcher's death. They were not easy years, marked by loneliness and grief, but they were also years of gratitude and reflection. She spent time with her family, telling them stories about their grandfather, about how they had met and fallen in love, about the early days when they were building something from nothing. She wanted them to understand that love was not just grand gestures and dramatic declarations. It was biscuits and seconds and forever. It was choosing someone every day and never regretting that choice. On a warm spring morning in 1943, Dahlia Owens Morgan passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82. She was laid to rest beside Fletcher in the Gila City Cemetery, under a headstone that read, "She made biscuits that melted hearts. He asked for seconds, and then for forever." Together they built a life of love. The restaurant continued to operate under Lily's management, and then under Dahlia Rose's, and then under her children. Each generation maintained the tradition of Dahlia's famous biscuits, using the recipe that Fletcher had preserved in that wooden box. The recipe became a family heirloom, passed down with stories about the woman who had created it and the man who had loved her. Years became decades, and decades became generations. The restaurant underwent renovations and expansions, adapted to changing times and tastes, but it never lost the essential character that Dahlia and Fletcher had given it. It remained a place where people came not just for food but for connection, for the sense that they were part of something larger than themselves. And every morning, someone in the kitchen made biscuits using Dahlia's recipe. They were light and flaky and perfect, just as they had always been. And people still traveled from miles around to taste them, still declared them the finest biscuits they had ever eaten, still felt inexplicably comforted by the simple act of breaking bread baked with care. Because that was Dahlia's legacy. Not just a recipe or a restaurant, but the understanding that the smallest acts of love could build empires, that a biscuit made with care could change a life, that asking for seconds could lead to forever, that a shy cowboy and a lonely cook could find each other in the vastness of the New Mexico territory and create something that would outlast them both. Their love story became part of Gila City's folklore, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But to those who had known them, who had witnessed their devotion firsthand, there was nothing mythical about it. It was simply true. Fletcher and Dahlia had loved each other completely, had built something meaningful together, and had proved that happily ever after was not just a fairy tale ending but something that could be achieved through patience, kindness, and the daily choice to love. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not wealth or fame or grand achievements, but love. The love between two people who found each other against all odds and held on tight, through every challenge and change, until death finally parted them. The love that began with biscuits and grew into forever, feeding not just bodies but souls, not just a family but an entire community. That love, that beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary love was what lasted. It was what mattered. It was everything.